As we approach the end of the academic year, it's crucial to make the most of our resources to ensure our students achieve their fullest potential. Today, we'll explore how supplemental materials can play a vital role in reinforcing and enhancing student learning outcomes. Join us as we delve into innovative strategies tailored to educators, providing practical insights on integrating supplementary resources effectively. We'll look at real-world examples from our extensive KWL collection, showcasing how these materials can enrich language instruction and enhance students' engagement. Additionally, we'll discuss aligning these strategies with world language standards, ensuring educators can confidently navigate curriculum requirements while fostering authentic communicative competence. I am delighted to introduce Katie Mickle, our presenter for today's session. Katie is a world language sales consultant at Collect World Languages with an MA in Hispanic Studies, concentrating on Spanish linguistics. She was a college-level Spanish instructor for 7 years and has a strong background in second language acquisition. Katie is passionate about creating classroom experiences that motivate, engage, and inspire language learners through real-world applications and authentic materials. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Katie Mickle.
Thank you, Sabrina. Hello, everybody, and thanks again to all of you for joining us from all over on this great Wednesday evening to discuss supplemental materials, and in particular, diving into our readers. So Sabrina did a great introduction for myself. Here's some more information about me. I live in Dallas, Texas now. If anyone from Texas, shout out to Dallas, even though I'm from Louisiana. But we're going to dive into today's main content. So starting off, we're going to look at what supplemental materials are and why would we incorporate them in our classes, and then also look at why now, the end of the year, as a time that we can particularly benefit from using supplements. We will look at supplemental resources from our collection with a focus on readers, and in particular, the reporteros readers, and how to use readers with your students. We'll talk about ways to incorporate readers and lots of activity ideas that can be used with readers to really get the most out of them. We will also touch on incorporating the world language standards through the accompanying activities that you use with your reader. We'll also briefly see a few of our other reader collections and additional supplements, and lastly, have some time for Q&A. We'll get through as many questions as we can. And I'd like to add here that although I'll be demonstrating these strategies through our reporteros readers, you can apply these strategies and tips to any reading material that you use in your courses. So I'm just using our readers because that's the material that I know best, but please know that these strategies can apply to any reading material that you use. So jumping right in, we'll start with supplemental materials, the definition for what they are. So we'll be using the following definition as supplemental materials being books and other materials that we can use in addition to the course book. So they include skills development materials, grammar, vocabulary, and phonology practice materials, collections of communicative activities, any teacher's resources, or web materials that you use. So I've got some examples there on the screen. This could be a grammar supplement, a news article that you might find from anywhere around the world, a workbook, a reader, or additional web materials such as this is lyrics training, but there's lots of websites out there for pronunciation practice and listening practice. So just curious from our audience here, those of you that are in attendance, what supplemental materials have you used with your students? Maybe some from this list. What would you add to this list? So let's just hear some quick ideas for how you all use supplemental materials and what kinds you incorporate in your classes. Anyone want to share? Just real quick, anything? You can just type in the chat. Any supplements, workbooks, listening practice? Yeah, great. So we see people have used a lot of what's in the list, created some from other websites. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and hopefully, you'll get some other ideas with how to use readers, particularly if any of you have used readers, and we'll get to that. Yeah, lyrics training. Good, good. Cool. All right, so we'll keep moving on. So why would we use supplemental materials? So there's lots of reasons why. A couple reasons could be to give learners extra language or skills practice. So maybe if you want them to get more grammar practice, for example, there's not enough in your course book, you could use a supplemental material for that. To fill in the gaps from your main curriculum. So maybe if you think that your main curriculum is lacking in something, or that something could be expanded upon more, you have an idea to really take something further, that's where you could incorporate supplemental materials to add variety to our teaching. So we aren't doing the same monotonous things stuck in our routine with our students, which helps prevent the next point, which is helping students to feel more motivated. We want them to be motivated in class and not feel bored by the class being predictable. We want to keep their interest, and supplemental materials can do that really well. Also, we can use them to connect with other disciplines and pop culture, which is part of keeping student interest. But for anything that's relevant happening, right now around the world, that's a good way to incorporate supplemental materials into your class as well. So do any of these reasons resonate with you, those that have used them? Are some of these reasons why you've chosen to use supplemental materials? Any other reasons you can think of? Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing some comments here. Connection, definitely want them to connect to your courses. Yeah, keeping class relevant and engaging. I love that. Fridays, kids want to do something different on Fridays. Yeah, everyone's thinking about the weekend and they want to break things up. They've been focused and paying attention Monday through Thursday. Let's reward them on Fridays with something a little different. Yeah, I like that. That kind of leads into why now. So same kind of logic for Fridays kind of applies to why supplemental materials might be particularly useful now, being the end of the year time. So there's a couple reasons why it can be a good time to draw on your supplements. And one can be maybe you've covered what you wanted to from your main curriculum, but you still have more time to fill. There's still weeks left in the school year and you've got to fill it with something. So that could be a good time to bring in a supplement. It's also review season. You need to spend time reviewing content, and maybe you don't have quite enough review material, or you'd like some varied review material so you don't do the same things for review. Supplemental materials can work great for that. They can summarize and kind of review and recycle the content and themes, the structures that you've covered throughout the year so far. And it's something that can be relatively low prep, depending on the supplemental material. So that's another reason why now is a good time. And also just the reality of effort levels at the end of the year. We might all be wanting to do something unique, get out of our routine. You want to keep the student interest because they're all thinking about summer break or their exams, and they're kind of checking out with wanting to still be learning new things. And you may not want to put too much pressure on them either, or overwhelm with classwork, because they do have exams right around the corner in all their courses, and that can be a stressful time. So supplements can be a good fun add at the end of the year for that reason too. Some of you might be finishing your classes, but those of you that still have some time left, consider weaving in a supplement, particularly for those reasons right now. But keep in mind, regardless of what kind of supplement you use, they're always more successful. And some of you have mentioned this in the chat I've seen so far. If they're relevant and compelling, you want it to be something that your students would be interested in or find useful. You want them to be connected to your course goals and learning outcomes. You also would want them to be age and level appropriate, which would help ensure that they're comprehensible to your learners. That's really important too, that you're choosing something that's at their level, not too advanced, not too overwhelming. And you want it to enhance your curricula rather than leave them thinking like, well, that was a waste of time, or why did we do that? You want it to be something that just expands upon what you've already been working on in class. So for these reasons, we decided to focus on readers today and highlight specifically the line of new readers that accompany our Reporteros program. And these readers accomplish these points, and they're very easy to use in your courses too. The ones we'll be looking at today come with activities in a teacher's guide. Plus, we'll see really just how easy it is to use readers to connect to your world language standards. So let's jump into our reader collection. And first, a little bit about why to incorporate our readers and why these reporteros readers are a particular standout to focus on today. We know before we mentioned that readers make a good choice as a supplement. And a few more reasons why you might want to is that we know input in the target language is the foundation for language acquisition. Students need input. It's very essential that we provide enough of that in class. Students get to see authentic language used through readers. It's engaging repetition. It doesn't feel redundant to see the same structures or sentences or words over and over again because it's part of a story and that can keep their interest. Readers promote multicultural communicative competence. They foster an interest in reading and strengthen reading skills, generally speaking, which is good for our students and applies to all of their course subjects and their life as a whole, to hone their reading skills. It's something they need for life. It's a fun way to engage with the language that's different from a course textbook, and it can create interdisciplinary connections as well. So many people aren't sure where to start when it comes to using readers. So you might think like, oh, this sounds really great, but in practice, how do you actually use a reader? What if I don't even like reading very much? What if my students don't like reading? How do I approach this? So here are a few ideas, but I know that some of you here have used readers before, and you might be familiar with these ideas or others. So please, I'd love to pop in the chat here after I've read through these and see ways that you've used readers with your classes. So please share ideas. I love that we can all learn from each other through these webinars too. So one idea first, you can use readers as free voluntary reading time, which is often referred to as FVR if you've seen those initials around. This can be done lots of ways. So you could dedicate time at the beginning of class or at the end of class for whatever length of time you set, where a student goes and gets their reading material and just reads. So you say, we're going to read for the first, 10 minutes or the last 15, whatever you determine. And they could pick a book from maybe a class library that you have, where they pick whatever reader they're interested in. Or you could have the whole class read one reader where they're all reading from it kind of at their own pace, at their leisure. There's lots of information out there about free voluntary reading, lots of teachers that do it successfully. So lots of information there if that's a way that you'd like to explore using readers, at least as a start. You can also use readers as complementary material to your main course book. And it could align thematically with your main course book and or with your target language objectives, your course goals that you've set. So this is the case with the readers that we're going to see today. They complement our Reporteros curriculum and are just an add-on that form part of your course. The last main way that you can use readers is as an entire unit. So all of the coursework centers around the reader itself, where the reader serves like the course material for that unit. And if you pick a compelling enough reader with enough content that's at their level, cultural, that can be easily accomplished too. So based on those ideas or others, does anyone have any other ideas to share about how they've used readers in their classes? Yeah, and I saw there's a comment about the vocabulary matching. That's definitely one way to complement the material. Yeah, definitely small groups to differentiate, practice vocabulary. Of course, yeah, that's great. I love that. Definitely that's why it's key to be sure that you've scoped out the reader ahead of time and you know that it's suitable for your students and it's on par with what they've been learning if you're wanting to get that vocab practice from it. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys, for sharing those. And I see that we've got our link to our readers there in the chat too. So that's something else that you can explore after our session today. But we'll keep moving along here then. So for the last point there about using a reader for an entire unit, just something to remember, you don't want students to get bored with a reader if it takes too long to get through. So, one thing to do is to be sure that you pick something that either A, isn't too long of a reader, or that it has lots of plot developments rather quickly and memorable moments from chapter to chapter. That way you can keep the student interest in the reading. Or you could always just have them read part of the book, especially if you've read it ahead of time and you know we really only need the first half of this book to get a lot out of it. You could decide to do that too and just shorten the amount that you cover. So whether the reader is your whole class or just part of your class, it's good to prepare students for what they're going to read. So, as much as you can, look out for any topics ahead of time that could be problematic for your learners. That's good to know, and to just have a class library that you know is suitable. So as I mentioned, the readers that we're going to focus on for this session are 3 from our newest line of Spanish readers, all edited by Diego Ojeda and designed to perfectly align with the content in Reporteros Level 1. So they're all novice level readers. And the readers expand upon the content of Reporteros 1, incorporating the themes and vocabulary and language structures from level 1. And I'll get into what some of those are in case you're wanting to use these and don't use Reporteros. They also use the same reporteros or young journalists that are in the core curriculum series. They use those same journalists as characters in their readers. So in this way, the storytelling from the textbook is kind of continued and just amplified here through our readers that go with level 1. But these can also stand alone. So if you're there and you're like, but I don't teach with reporteros, these can be used independently and they'd work well for any introductory Spanish class. The stories stand on their own. You don't have to have the course book to use these readers. They just work as a great complement if you do. Additional readers will come out for later levels too of reporteros if you're using any later levels besides level 1. The Reporteros readers are based on the pedagogical approach known as acquisition-driven instruction, or ADI, which is a methodology that focuses on the natural acquisition of the language. So exposure to input being first and foremost for this method, but not just any input. Input students can process for meaning and that which is comprehensible. So through meaningful immersion in these readers and an exciting, compelling narrative that's supported by images and cognates, students can acquire language in a manner similar to how they learn their native language, organically, implicitly, maybe even unconsciously when they're not aware of it. So these carefully crafted stories that we're going to look at just coming up right now are written in comprehensible Spanish, and they're tailored to challenge students just beyond their current level. We know that I+1 level is what we're striving for. So this approach enables students to be able to expand their vocabulary and grasp new structures without feeling overwhelmed. So let's dig a little deeper into each of these readers. So we'll get a quick synopsis here of the plot, just so you know what they're all about. Un Gol Fantástico tells the inspiring story of Isa, who's a talented Mexican-American soccer player who overcomes numerous challenges to achieve greatness as a soccer player. She's a high school student, and it's a lot about her life navigating her sports teams and wanting to get into college. So some themes for this reader include basic personal information, if you're wondering kind of structures and vocabulary, things like names, ages, where people are from and where they live, colors, vocabulary for birthdays and birthday parties, weather expressions, family members and family relationships, also physical descriptions and personality traits, likes and dislikes. Things of that basic likes and dislikes would be in this reader. And a lot of these themes that I'm saying actually repeat for the other readers too. So that's one good thing about these readers that's done really well, is that structures are recycled. And that's true for our main course curriculum in Reporteros as well. The next reader that we'll see is Me Despierto y Bailo, which follows a group of teenage musicians from Spain and Peru that come together to compete at a music festival in Lima. They're also students. So some themes for this reader include extracurricular activities and hobbies, technology and social media use, clothing items, daily routines, food. Those are some vocabulary that's used in this reader in particular. And then Todo para Todos tells the inspiring story of Guada from Mexico and Juan Jose from Colombia, who together managed to make Guada's school more accessible. So some themes for this reader are describing class schedules and school subjects and school life, parts of the school, things like that, household chores and parts of the house, furniture, vocabulary to describe your house, and also clothing and accessories, particularly as relates to school uniforms and school rules. So as you can see, these movie-like plots are compelling and they're relevant to the young learners in our classroom. They are teenagers themselves, like the main characters and the readers, who are going through similar experiences, like navigating your friendships, your home life, relationships with your parents, demands of school, your goals for the future. Students can see themselves reflected in the reader, in the book, things like playing on sports teams, collaborating with your peers, exploring your talents and your passions in school, social dynamics of friendships, wanting to get into college, all things that can resonate with a lot of our students. So the plots in these readers allow for comprehended language because we've kept it level appropriate at that novice level with lots of strategies to facilitate comprehension, which we'll get to on the next slide. It's an age-appropriate drama level. These are teenage experiences. There's an intercultural focus. These readers showcase the variety of Spanish-speaking cultures and foster an appreciation really for all of their rich qualities and differences. And these readers are full of positive values, things like collaboration, teamwork, empathy, creativity, things that we would want our students to be celebrating in their lives too. So another important aspect to remember when we're using readers is that they really should be approachable and at level. It can feel intimidating for students to see a whole book in front of them, completely in a different language, and it'd be natural for them to approach it and think, okay, I'm not going to understand any of this from the get-go. Just assume it's all in Spanish, that's over my head. So our readers really work to prevent that by including lots of support to help facilitate comprehension. We want students to understand what they're reading, not just because it'll be a more enjoyable experience for them. We want them to have fun through this reading, but more importantly, we know that comprehending the material is essential for acquisition to take place. If they look at it and feel intimidated, overwhelmed, or don't understand, it didn't accomplish what we needed and it goes right over their heads. So we want this to be something that supports acquisition. And so to do that, a few ways that our readers can work to achieve that is through including visuals in the chapter. So using illustrations to connect the words to a visual representation can really help facilitate understanding. And it also makes the book look more approachable. I mean, how many of you know kids at middle school, younger, even older, that flip through a book looking for, are there any pictures? How many pictures are in this book? So I know how much is actually reading versus how much is broken up. It makes it seem less intimidating and scary. So we use visuals. And I'd say this is a good tip no matter the reading. I mean, even if it's not built into the reader like ours are, any reading material you have, as much as you can bring it to life with an image of a place that's featured or something like that, it can really help students to make those connections. Also, there is a glossary at the end of the reader with definitions for new words, as you can see here. This is the digital version of the reader. So each word's on a separate line so that a screen reader can more easily read each word, but there is a glossary in the print version of the reader as well. So that can help students to grow their vocabulary too, to have those words defined. There are also footnotes with cultural information. It's highlighted there in yellow on the screen. That can help students also get more out of what they're reading to understand that cultural component a bit further. Also, the chapters are short. So just like looking for lots of pictures, students are looking for how long is this chapter before they start reading it. And so these are short chapters, on average, usually around 3 to 4 pages, but they could be anywhere from 2 to 6 pages. Like you see here, this is a short chapter. Here are just 2 pages. And there's lots of simple, short sentences with lots of repetition. So we don't have long, drawn out, complex sentences for the most part, and these are novice level readers. There's a lot of dialogue. Rather than seeing lots of chunks, long text, paragraphs to read, dialogues are easier to understand. They're naturally shorter sentences, and it helps to be more approachable for the student as well to see. There's lots of dialogue that'll be easy, to understand. So that's one way we can help them actually comprehend what they're reading here. And lastly, to keep it comprehensible, the chapters do use lots of cognates and high frequency words. So you can see some cognates there on the screen: experiencia, servicio, tolerante, many minutos, words that they should know just by them being similar to if English is the shared first language for your students anyway, then they can see the connection there with those words. So lots of cognates and high frequency things, verbs, ser, estar, tener, I, some verbs that come up very often and are used quite regularly. So we've seen some strategies for helping a reader be more comprehensible and tips for choosing an appropriate reader, but it's much more enriching for students to not just stop at only reading the material, but instead to be able to take it a bit further and allow students to review and interact with the language and information they read through various activities. So we include a wide range of practical activities that are going to reinforce key concepts presented in the readings. And we know that this repeated exposure to the information, having the activities that build upon the information from inside the reader, all of this further supports students' language acquisition. Having that meaningful repetition is useful in making sure they acquire those forms, or at least helping them to be able to do that. So for our readers, like I mentioned at the beginning, there's a teacher's guide available, which is a downloadable PDF that consists of ready-to-print worksheets with activities for every chapter of the reader. So we'll see lots of examples in this presentation of different activities that are included. You could print the worksheets or send their fillable interactive PDF. You could send that to your students. They could complete it and send it back to you. So the activities range, they encompass vocabulary, grammar, listening comprehension, reading comprehension, cultural reflections, and they do really help streamline your teaching and your lesson planning to help you get the most out of the reader and your student to get the most out of the reader. And importantly, save you time as the teacher, not to come up with activities for each chapter of the reader. So you'll also find MP3 audio files on our digital platform, the KWL Hub, where you can find the entire reader available digitally in a fully accessible format. So there is an audio recording, a read aloud version of every chapter of the reader. So we will take a look at a few activities designed to accompany these readers. And as we do, we will draw connections to some of the Florida Next Generation World Language Standards, which are based on the ACTFL standards for world languages. So as we go through these examples here in the next couple of slides, remember that they could be applied to any reader that you use. We're using these Reporteros readers, but these examples, they're chock full of ideas that you could apply to any reader that you use with your classes. So for the Florida World Language Standards, we know it's important that our courses include practice in the 3 modes of communication: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational communication. And our featured Reporteros readers come with activities in the teacher's guide to help further these communicative goals. We will see today the interpretive mode, interpretive listening and interpretive reading, and focus kind of on that standard 1 being interpretive listening. And we'll see just how easy it is to connect your corresponding activities for a reader to your standards, just as you could connect your main course, the activities that are part of your main course book. So standard 1 is interpretive listening. And on the left, these are both activities from the teacher's guide. And these come from, on the left, we have the Todo para Todos. And on the right, it's an activity from Un Gol Fantástico. On the left, we can see an activity in which the teacher will read an excerpt from the chapter aloud, and the students listen and underline the details that they think are incorrect. Then they get to listen again to the teacher reading an excerpt and correct the information. So this activity is actually in every chapter and every reader and serves as one of the main listening, comprehension, interpretive listening activities. You could also decide to play the audio for the chapter instead of as the teacher reading aloud the excerpt, however you prefer. But with audio available for every chapter, having that read aloud version, you have the flexibility to really turn many of the activities into listening activities instead. So like here on the right, this is an activity for students to match the description that they read in the book about a character named Julian. They're matching that description to the correct image there according to what they read. And rather than having students read the description of Julian in the book, you could simply have them listen using the audio file for the chapter. So they listen to the description and then they pick which image best describes Julian from what they understood. And that little box in yellow is highlighting where on the digital version, that's where you can play aloud the audio for the chapter. And this gives you a lot of flexibility to offer more listening practice to your students. A lot of the activities could be converted into a listening instead of a reading. Standard 2 is interpretive reading. And there are many, many activities of all different kinds for this because these are readers. So lots of activities that can accompany a reader can be interpretive reading activities and kind of practice that reading comprehension. And we're going to flip through several examples now, bearing in mind again that these could apply to any reading. First, on the left, you can see true-false reading comprehension questions with a section at the bottom to correct the false sentences. That's a pretty straightforward reading comprehension style to do some true-false. On the right, we have more reading comprehension practice through multiple choice and some fill-in-the-blank sort of short answer questions. Then there's these next two examples. On the left, we can see short answer questions, all of them all the way through. And on the right, it's an activity to choose which option is the best summary for the chapter. And writing summaries, maybe finding inaccurate details in a summary, or choosing which is the best summary are all great ways also to test, to practice reading comprehension rather, but still be very input focused, especially in this case where they're getting more practice, more reading, more repetition 3 times in a row to choose that summary. And these next two are really fun. I like these. On the left, it's an activity to decide which character that detail describes. Does it describe Isa, Paula, or both girls? And it has details about their personality, their physical traits, their hobbies. So again, another really good way to get additional input, repeated structures, simple sentences, but kind of vary your reading comprehension from traditional true, false, or short answer, but kind of have a new way to engage with the content. And then on the right, it's a timeline activity, which is another really fun way to check comprehension. This is a great way to get that added input that I liked to do with readings whenever I was in the classroom. So students are asked in this activity example to put events from the story in order, and they have the events, you don't see it here, but on the next page in the teacher's guide, it has all the events for them to choose from to put in order. As a bonus, you could have students come up with their own timeline by having them come up with the main events from the story. So your students are the ones writing what happened. And then you could have them do that in groups if you wanted, and then have them exchange their timelines or their main events with other groups to put them in order. So that's one way to kind of expand upon this. If you want to do this with another reading, that's an idea. But the timeline or putting events of a story in order is a really great way to engage with the material too and check comprehension. And then lastly, write a short summary of the story in 50 words. This is one that you could use as presentational communication too, if you wanted to have them the presentational writing. But it's a great way to just to check comprehension in this case by having students come up with their own summary. So that is always a good activity you can add in for any reading. In addition to communication, and we just looked at the interpretive mode in those examples, interpretive listening and interpretive reading, Standard 6, according to the Florida Next Gen World Language Standards, is culture, and intercultural standards are a big important part also of those of Florida standards. And cultural standards are really fairly easy to accomplish with readers when you pick a reader that has a story set in, for example, a community from the target language. As in this case with these readers, the stories are all set in the Spanish-speaking world with main characters from those communities. So it can make incorporating culture actually quite natural because it's just built right into the reader. And we'll see what that looks like here on the next page. So the benefit of readers is that the cultural content really is integrated. It's embedded right into the reader itself, and students get that cultural input in context through reading the story, and culture is therefore not taught as an isolated topic. You'll find that's true even in our Reporteros main course book curriculum, that culture is embedded on every page. And so if you're teaching with that, you already know that. And you'll also see then how these readers really complement and expand upon the cultural content that you find in Reporteros. But if you're using these readers independently, there are still plenty of opportunities to delve deeper into the cultural content included. There's lots that is touched on in the reader that if you have the time and the interest can really flesh out more for your learners. So for example, in chapter 1 of Todo para Todos, which we can see on the screen here, this first page of chapter 1 already mentions that Juan Jose, who's from Bogota, and he's the featured reportero or young journalist from chapter 4 of Reporteros, our level 1 course book series. But this chapter starts off describing him at home, where it says that cumbia music is playing at his house, and his mom has made arepas and coffee for lunch. So here, you could take a minute to play cumbia music for your class. You could research famous songs or artists. You could discuss what an arepa is and how they're made in Colombia versus maybe somewhere else. You could learn more about Colombian coffee and where it's grown. So much that you could really take just from this one page to delve into the culture and kind of the more of those 3 Ps, right? We can look in this case at some products from Colombia, coffee being one, and kind of explore that a little bit further. And that could take as long or as short as you want it to, but it's there for you to expand upon. So just knowing that that is one way that culture is just weaved in. Doesn't say now we're going to learn about culture. It's just part of us reading about Juan Jose and his life, and we're ready to get engrossed into this story with him. And part of that is his Colombian culture. And in this next example, which actually also comes from Todo para Todos, that's the name of that reader, students read about how at Guada's school in Mexico, the principal tells her in this scene that she isn't allowed to wear tennis shoes with her skirt because that isn't part of the dress code or the school uniform rules. So the principal's telling Guada what is appropriate to wear with a skirt, and kind of how she can stay better to the uniform rules. And Guada says, yes, I'll do that. So here's a chance perhaps to learn more about uniform protocol in Mexico, where this school is set. Guada's school is in Mexico in this reader, and to tell students that uniforms are usually required in private and public schools in Mexico, which is something they may not know. You could also have students from this look up dress codes, let's say at 3 schools in Mexico, where they present to the class what they found, and show a picture of what the uniform looks like if they can find that information. Or if you could already have some schools picked out that students can choose and kind of learn more about the dress code, what it looks like, if it's striped, if it's blue, whatever the colors might be for that school's uniform. You could have them dig deeper into school systems in Mexico. I mean, so much to take from this, to delve deeper into culture in this case. All right, and that's the next standard we'll look at is comparisons. And maybe as we've just gone through those examples of culture, you've already had some ideas come to mind for how you could further use them for some good cultural comparisons as well. So we're going to just do that. We're going to look at those 2 examples we just saw. So the Colombian lunch, we have Juan Jose eating with his parents, coffee and arepas. And we have Guada and her school uniform in Mexico on the right. So what are some comparisons? Just looking at those 2 examples, what are some comparisons that you could ask your students to make? We looked at them just as a way for you to delve deeper into culture, but how could you use these same examples for cultural comparison and reflection with your students? Anything come to mind? Feel free to pop in the chat. Let's see what people have to say here. Let's see. Don't be shy. Any ideas for how you could use these? So I had a couple of things come to mind. I can start us off while you all are thinking or typing in the chat. You could, for example, with them sitting around Juan Jose and his parents, you could ask students if they eat lunch at home. And in the reader, they explained this was on a Sunday. So you could say, on Sundays, do you eat lunch at home? At what time do you eat? In the book, it explains it's 11:30. You could ask them what they eat and drink typically. Do you eat with your parents and sit down together? Just a couple of things that could come to mind to compare what your lunch looks like versus their lunch. For Guada and the school uniform, you could say, do you have uniforms at your school? How do the uniforms in the book compare to your uniforms? Do you think that she should be able to wear tennis shoes with her skirt? Why or why not? What's the dress code like at your school? How does it compare? Is it strict? So many things that you could use to talk about that. Yeah, what they normally have for breakfast, for sure. Compare with their own life or something they saw on TV. Partners can compare. Yeah, you can get students and partners. Great to do that too. Yeah, I love that. So there's so much, I mean, really, the opportunities are endless when it comes to it, just how much do you want to flesh out? But there's a lot here to unpack. And that's just one example, one photo from the reader. Here's another one. This is another example of a cultural product. This comes from Un Gol Fantastico, where students read about Dana, who she has to take some extra time. It mentions in the reader there how she needs a minute to pay the salesperson because she isn't used to the Mexican pesos. She's looking at them going, wow, these look more similar than I am used to. So students could then, they could look at this image on the screen and see that there are two coins reflecting 1 and 2 pesos and discuss how that's different from the US dollar or our currency system. They can reflect on what parts of our money look really similar, how we distinguish our coins, just a really small way to add, compare what money looks like in the US. Definitely. I'm seeing some more comments here. Oh yeah, what the home looks like. Another great thing, if you've already practiced that stuff with your students, maybe those vocabulary words, you could give them some to help. I think you're referring to the picture with Juan Jose and his family in their kitchen, definitely to compare what the home looks like. Currency exchange rates, that's always really interesting. I feel like students love seeing how far the dollar goes in different places, or doesn't go for that matter. Yeah, that's another really cool thing to do too, especially, and there's the Me Despierto y Bailo, which I believe also has some exchange with currency. And that is Peru and Spain. So seeing both of those versus the US would be, definitely an interesting exercise as well. Good ideas. Yeah, so there's definitely lots of opportunities for comparison with cultural products. But there's not just comparison of practices and products, but also perspectives. So students read in Un Gol Fantastico, remember about Isa. She's multicultural and bilingual, similar to Dana, the reportera, excuse me, the young journalist from chapter 1. And that's a picture of her there. She's from Chicago. And in this example on the left, that screenshot of words from the chapter, Isa is talking about the languages that she speaks. And she's saying that she uses Spanish with her dad's family, and Spanish and English with her mom. And so one really easy thing to do for comparison in this case is to ask your students, do you speak any other languages at home? Do your grandparents speak a different language? Because Issa's writing here that her grandparents actually speak Mayan language. So you could ask your students, do your grandparents speak something different? If they do, are you able to communicate with them? Do you know much about that language? And you could also make comparisons between the characters in the story and comparing them to your students' lives. I think someone mentioned this in the chat just a second ago too. That's a natural comparison. How does their life compare to the character they're reading about? Or if you're using reporteros, you can compare them to the journalist in the main course book with the character in the reader. Like, for example, how Dana lives in Chicago, and she's from a multicultural family as well, just like Isa. You could ask students to compare what they might have in common, Isa and Dana, or even ask if they think they'd be friends, why or why not. Just so lots of ways to weed out more time spent really digging into the reader itself. Another example is in Todo para Todos, Juan Jose, he is taking an international trip alone for the first time. And in the first chapter, we read about how, he's 15. It's his first trip alone without his parents. And in the reader, it describes how, he plays it cool in front of his parents, but really he's kind of nervous about this first trip. So that's one way you could definitely also just add in some comparison and ask your students, have you ever flown alone before? Where did you go? How old were you when you went? Were you nervous to go? How did it turn out? So just little moments like that to really take the story a bit further and connect with your students, connect them to the reading, and getting valuable language practice too. And there are also linguistic comparisons. So on the bottom right, we see highlighted in yellow that word wow, dice Laura. So that's the equivalent to the English word wow. Just a moment you could pause and have students say, what do you think that word is? And there's also linguistic comparisons between, across Spanish dialects in different regions, such as the expression bacán, which is defined in the footnotes in this reader as meaning awesome or cool in Peru. And then que guay, which is the same kind of meaning, cool, fantastic, in Spain. And that's defined in the footnote of the reader as well. So this is just a way that we can also have linguistic comparison, not just cultural comparison, built into the reader because we focus on so many different countries and cultures through the readers. And so many more. These are just some examples of comparisons that are built into each of these three readers. So in addition to the many examples that we've seen so far, which again are built into your reader activities, at least we saw those with the interpretive communication part, those are there to save you time. And here are a few more ideas you could use with any reading to help you get the most out of it. So you could have students illustrate or draw an excerpt that they either listen to or read. So that could be reading comprehension or listening comprehension, whichever one you think they need more that day, that week. And this works really well to illustrate main events if you want them to try it that way. So rather than having them draw something you pick out, they listen to or read, you could have them just draw the main events of the story, or they could draw their favorite moment from the story, and then they could have other students guess it if they just held up the drawing, or they could describe it. And that way it could be a presentational activity, presentational speaking, for example. If you have them describe what they drew, maybe why it's their favorite scene, something like that. Definitely the why part could be a little easier for beyond novice level, but depending how basic you care for their answers to be, that could work too. I love the illustrate or draw with a reading or listening. I think that's a great way to check comprehension. And it's kind of fun. It's something different that they don't always get to do in class. A good pre-reading activity is to have students make hypotheses or predictions about the topic or the content. And I believe this actually is built into at least the teacher's guide for Un Gol Fantástico. But before they even do the reading, they look at the cover of the book and make a prediction about what they think it's about. That's one really good way to just get more hype around the reading and get more out of it. So you could also use it where they either look at an image from the chapter, like the visuals we have here. You could jump ahead to the next chapter, for example, pick one of the visuals, show them and say, what do you think is going to happen in the next chapter based on this visual? So making predictions is really fun too. And then they get more invested in the content and actually reading to see what found out, to find out what happens rather, excuse me. It can kind of help keep their interest and their buy-in to want to read. When you kind of have it be I don't know, we'll see, kind of a fun surprise. So that's another great reading activity that works with anything. You could also do an activity where students write an email to the author, or they email one of the main characters in the book and ask them whatever they'd want to know. Maybe they didn't know why they chose that, they made that decision in the chapter, and they want to ask them a couple of questions like, why didn't you go to the party with Paula? She's your friend. Whatever the storyline fits. They could write an email or a text, or you could change the format for that however you want to with your students. You could also have students write a diary entry from the perspective of one of the characters. And that's pretty cool too, where they kind of take the role of that main character and write a few sentences about how they might feel or think from some event that happened in the plot. Students could also come up with alternative endings, alternative beginnings, alternative dialogues, just change what was said to certain characters, or alternative adventures, like change the season, make whatever event from that chapter you're wanting them to change, pretend it happened in winter, or pretend it was on the beach. So you just change the setting or the season, and that can be really fun and creative for your students to come up with to see what they can come up with that one. So that's really fun, applies to any reading too. You could take a part of the plot and invite students to do their own research. So, one of the readers made Despierto y Bailo is about students coming together to compete in a music festival in Lima, a group of students from Spain, a group from Peru. So you could have students look up a famous musical group from Peru or from Spain and present a little bit about them to the class, where they kind of get to become young journalists themselves and research a cultural component in the book. So that's always a really fun thing to do too. And role plays are fun, where students can act out a scene from the book. That's actually also built into the teacher's guide. I know, at least for Un Gol Fantástico, that's one of the activities, is to act out scenes. So, and then so many more. I mean, there are so many more ideas for readers, lots out there from our webinar archive and other places on the internet for how you can get the most out of readings. But certainly with what we've seen with this list, there is a ton that you could do to really flesh out the material in a reader. And it's good to have a combination of pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading activities to make sure that students are set up appropriately to handle the reading and that they've understood afterwards. So that's kind of the segment where our focus was on those Reporteros readers specifically. Now we're going to look at just a couple more readers that we have, and we have more even than what you'll see here. So do check out that link in the chat if you're interested in incorporating readers for any language, not just Spanish. And we'll look at some additional readers that we have. We spent most of our time on those Reporteros readers. We will have them for French too, by the way. Those of you that are French teachers will have, for our Reporter Francophone sister series, we will have readers next summer for Reporter Francophone readers, rather, specifically for that series. But I'm going to quickly run through a few other options for what's available now. So also for Spanish, we have the 24 Hours In series, which is a collection of vibrant, fast-paced stories set also in various Spanish-speaking cities throughout the world. There is a digital version, there's practice activities, there's a glossary, visual dictionary to understand vocabulary, and that's something that that's offered there. And you can see here we've got Buenos Aires, Barcelona, Bogota, and Ciudad de Mexico. So that's available too. And there's more for Spanish on our website, tons of other readers. We've got some on clearance too that have a particular markdown right now that are extra well priced. So check those out if you want to snag any readers before next year's classes. Also for French, the same series of 24 Hours In. These hit a variety of Francophone cultures in different cities and regions. Just like for the Spanish version, these are going to come with a visual dictionary and practice activities. Similar idea for Italian. We have stories set in different Italian cities, providing a more modern take on Italian culture. And they all do have a digital format on our digital platform with practice activities, at least for the Italian series, they're there on the platform. For German, we also have lots of readers, but one series I'm going to highlight here is Leicht und Klasse, which actually complements the Klasse textbook series. So it follows, they're engaging stories that feature a couple of German characters as the protagonists. So it's content about life in Germany, and there are also reading comprehension exercises for each chapter. And then in addition to readers, don't forget about our other supplements. I know some of you here might incorporate supplements of other kinds. For example, if you do want to incorporate more grammar practice, we have a couple options for that. For Spanish, it's there on the left, called Gramática Básica. And this is going to cover essential grammatical concepts from mostly like a novice high up through advanced low. There are explanations and instructions in English in the book. and tons of activities, like more than 400 activities here. It's kind of like a workbook, practice book. That's something you can use to supplement with your students. We have a grammar book as well for French. That's there in the middle. Also with lots of practice activities. And for Italian as well, we have a grammar practice book. And, as you know, there are other forms of supplements on our website. We have a section dedicated to supplements. So please go there. That's where you'll find readers, these grammar practice books, as well as other supplemental material. So some takeaways for today's session: supplements can really not only help fill a gap, but as we've seen through readers, they can also reinforce and review key concepts. And they're a great way to keep student interest and support their acquisition at the same time. In particular, readers, comprehensible readers, carefully selected readers, are a valuable tool to enrich your classes. By using the acquisition-driven instruction approach through readers, educators can foster a motivating, effective learning environment for your students. So I hope that you all will try them or consider even just a couple minutes to see how your students take to them, if you haven't used them yet, as a really fun way to accomplish a lot. Great, and thank you all so much for your comments here. So we'll move on now. Yeah, if you want to go ahead, Sabrina, thanks.
Okay, no worries. Thank you, Katie, for such a wonderful presentation and for sharing your expertise with us today. We hope everyone enjoyed the session and gained practical strategies for maximizing year-end success using supplemental materials. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I'd like to invite you, first of all, to visit the KWL Learning Community. We have complimentary onboarding. To begin with, we have the platform training in case you get any of our materials, as well as initial content implementation. Of course, we have these free webinars and training sessions. We have many upcoming ones, and we do invite you to check those out. We also are present in several conferences and events throughout the States. So please, if you go to any of those and we are in there, we would love to meet you face to face. And we also have the possibility of getting paid continuing professional development. All of this is available on our website on cledwl.com-pd. So please visit it and please check out all the offer that we have for you, and we would be glad to help you. Also, we would like to invite you to visit our store and explore our catalog. This month we have a special clearance event with fantastic readers. We shared the link before. We're going to share that now as well. So we have fantastic readers and other supplemental material deals. It's a great opportunity to enhance your language instruction with high quality resources and at unbeatable prices. Now, let's open the floor to any questions you might have. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A feature if you still haven't done it. Now, Katie, our first question would be, what level or ages are the readers for? More or less.
Yeah.
This is something you mentioned before, but perhaps we could check it out again now.
That's a great question. So since they do go along with our Reporteros Level 1 main course book, we recommend that for middle and high school. So I would say for middle school students, these readers could work, and bearing in mind it'd be novice level. So roughly each reader goes along with 2 chapters at a time from Reporteros Level 1. So depending what level you teach or what reader interests you, that's a question you could always shoot me an email and I could say, okay, based on that, I'd recommend this of the 3 in the series, but they're all going to range from novice low through novice high. I probably wouldn't start one till you've done at least till you're maybe halfway through the year or so, just to make sure that students aren't overwhelmed by that. Even though it is going to be at that novice level, you want them to have some language already. So we recommend even for our series that after they've done chapters 1 and 2 is when they might start with that first reader, which would be Un Gol Fantastico as kind of your more basic of the 3. But that's a great question. So that's where I would say kind of be middle school through high school and the novice learners. Good question.
Perfect. Then the next question we have is, what are your thoughts about using these at college level, or which alternatives would you consider?
Yeah, great question too. So for the college level, I'd probably recommend going up to our 24 hours in series, which is just a bit less focused around the teenage experience of the here and now, which you get with the Reporteros readers we focused on today. Those just take kind of a bit more of a mature perspective, but we do still have some at the novice level. So for college, that's what I would say, to go with the 24 hours in series. You're still going to have practice activities. It's still focused in a Spanish speaking place. So there's a lot of cultural content you can pull from, and they can work with any curriculum too, especially if you have a main course book that focuses a unit on a certain place. You could maybe pick the reader that is also featured in that place if the level matches. And we do have those by level. And on our website with those readers, you typically can see at the top of the reader, or at least in the description on our website, what actful level it more or less corresponds to. So that'd be a way that you could help kind of center in on which one would work for you. But I'd go with that series. Yeah, good question.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Now, what kind of books can teachers use for an elementary class?
Yeah, for elementary level with readers, we have a couple on our website that can work for younger learners, but I don't know that you would, probably around fifth grade is when I would start with the readers that we have on our store. Younger than that, maybe fourth grade, you could with certain readers or parts of a reader, maybe not the whole reader. But younger than that, I think it'd be a lot to keep their interest through a reader. But we have some that could work for younger levels. And I think a lot of those might be on our clearance list right now too. So definitely shoot me an email, whoever's asking this question, and I can direct you to some and send a sample chapter. We can always send a sample chapter of the reader, which gives you an idea of the language, the wording, to see if it'd be a right fit for your students. Yeah.
Great. Now, for example, if someone doesn't use reporter or reporteros, in this case, of
Mhm.
course, the textbook, for example, is there any access to the teacher's guide, any print version, or anything that the teacher could use? For example, if they're using the readers, but they're not using the platform, which other ways can they use to combine or to use them?
Yeah, good question. So everything for the readers are available, everything's available separately. So you don't have to be using Reporteros to use these readers. The teacher's guide is only available in a digital format. So you would, as the teacher, you would have that digital access, which would give you access to the reader itself in digital format, as well as your teacher's guide with the worksheets, all those activities that go with each reader. And you'd probably want that anyways, because that's how you could convert many of the activities into listening practice, is if you have the digital component to be able to play the audio for the reader. So that's available. And for your students, there's the print reader itself, or digitally. It can be available either way for your students. But all of that is available for purchase, through our online store. If you want to buy many for your class, we do offer discounts. So 20 readers or more will get 20% off. So if that's something your school could support, you could push for that. Reach out to me, that's through, or we can get you in touch with the right person for your region. But we could make a quote for you that takes into account that discount. So certainly if you want, the website I think only lets you buy 5 at a time maybe. So if you want more than that, you'll automatically be directed to one of us and we can help you to push for that discount. And that's any combination. So 20 total. It could be 10 of Todo para Todos and 10 of Un Gol Fantástico, and that's 20, and that gets your 20% discount. So definitely reach out if you're wanting a class set or readers for all your students, but they could come print and you yourself as a teacher could have that digital access. But yeah, good question.
Great. And then another question we have is, are they organized by topic or grammar concept?
That's a good point. So these readers are not, because that's not necessarily the focus of this approach with acquisition-driven instruction. Grammar is something that should happen. The acquisition of these structures could happen more or less unconsciously, where students aren't aware or being explicitly drawn to a form or a theme. So they do correspond and work in tandem with the level 1 curriculum for reporteros. So if you're using those readers in particular, the reporteros readers we talked about today as the focus, we could share the scope and sequence with you of reporteros level 1, just so you could see what grammar and vocabulary is covered in those chapters that would go with the reader. But there won't be explicit attention to that in the reader. It won't be like chapter 1 is going to give you household vocabulary, for example. So we can just tell you that the language that's used is kind of corresponding to these general themes from level 1 of reporteros. And that's just unique to this reader series. For our other readers, we can let you know kind of the actful level, and based on that, what kinds of structures students would likely encounter in the text. Yeah, but beyond that, we can't say exactly what grammar is there. But a lot for this level, a lot of high frequency words, cognates, and we could always send a sample chapter too, and you could kind of see their simple sentences. So in this case, it would be really basic. So works really well for introductory Spanish. Yeah, good question.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. And
Yeah.
that seemed to be the last question we had. So again, thank you for the amazing insight. And of course,
Yeah.
thank you all for your engaging questions and participation.